They left me with the burrow beasts. No ceremony, no farewell code. Just engines biting a hole in the sky, and snow like ground glass flensing my cheeks. The clan's contrails scratched the aurora thin as scars, and I tried not to tilt my head like a child, waiting for a door to open that never would. I did not have a human name yet. Names are leashes, our elders say. But frost steals thought, and being nameless in the cold is a kind of death. I pressed my palm to the heat scar the launch had branded in the ice and whispered the angular syllables of the name I was born to. Then I ground it down to something I could carry without them. Ava. By choice. By spite. Below me, the burrow beasts turned in their tunnels and tasted my breath through micro-lattice vents, patient as glaciers. They do not have hearts where we expect, and their hunger sounds like distant thunder under stone. The sky cracked twice. A second ship came in wrong, nose high, vector bleeding, skin shedding sparks, and scythed across the salt flats with a metal scream. Its name was stenciled in flaking white. Trailblazer. A flare hiccuped, died. Lights blinked once like a stunned eye. I ran because running toward danger is proof that you are not prey. The forward hatch had jammed with the impact. I levered a pry bar into the seam and put muscle behind it. The panel popped. Cold gas exhaled. So did a human curse. 3 faces washed in blue emergency light. A man at the front, square eyes, old worry cut into his brow. Behind him, a compact woman wearing a med rig like a second spine, and a lanky figure shivering under foil, clutching a battered notebook as if ink could fight winter. "Don't step on the black," I said, the consonants clicking wrong in my mouth. The man didn't blink. "Ben Carter. Commander. We could use a local." His voice counted beats the way soldiers count ammunition. The medic lifted 2 fingers in greeting. "Mia Lee, tell me if you're bleeding." Her gaze swept me in quick, efficient arcs. The lanky one raised the notebook in apology. "Evan Brooks, engineer, hi." His smile tried, wobbled, held. "You must move," I said. "Now." The ice listens. They moved. I led. There's a basalt vein not far from the wreck, a knuckled ridge where the planet's bones brush air. Lava tubes braid under it. A maze I learned when fear taught me speed. We skated across salt that chimes under boots, wind polishing everything to mirror. The world here is a cathedral for no gods. At the cave mouth, the air rose warmer, smelling of iron and ash. I guided them in, stepped to the seam where knives of cold sneaked through, and reached for the moss. Thick, black, rubbery. Nerys' old invention for breathing walls. I tore strips gently and pressed them into the cracks. The fibers flexed and sealed. Wind fell to a hum. Heat began to think about staying. Ben watched, learning without asking. Mia exhaled and let her shoulders lower a single millimeter. Evan sketched the moss, braided filaments, little dots for pores, and then, as if embarrassed by the seriousness of it, drew a goofy, wide-eyed version beside it. He flashed the page at me like a child presenting a frog. "It's cute," I said. It came out like a warning. He grinned, sheepish. "Occupational hazard." Ben dumped a small kingdom of scrap on the floor. Coils, a converter with a cracked casing, a grizzled fan. "Heater," he said, like he was declaring a border. His hands were careful, hands that had learned to fix what orders never anticipated. Mia stripped off one glove and checked our fingers, ears, cheeks. "Any allergies to human stupidity?" she asked me, dry. "Not yet." The heater coughed, sputtered, then sighed warmth. Amber light softened the cave's teeth. We huddled close because space was small and heat narrows distance. Our elbows found each other's orbit and stayed. Outside, something heavy flexed under the ice. The floor whispered. Every hair along my wrists rose. Ben noticed the tilt of my head and came to the mouth with me. No questions. Rifle low. Shoulders square against the dark. The quiet between us weighed like a held breath. Not suspicion. Attention. Evan, still shivering, coaxed Ink to move. I showed him the clicks for patience, danger, and the one that means everything is a lie and you should run. He replied with sketches. Cave as a dome, wind as jagged lines, beast as a toothy blob with far too many teeth. Then a long rectangle with an angry lightning symbol, antenna, dead, an arrow, a question. There is a relay, I said. Old, obsidian range. We left it when cooperation cost less. Mia's eyes brightened with math. Range? Days? I mapped it with my hands. She nodded, already planning rations. Ben's jaw clicked shut on a decision. Tomorrow we strip the ship, then we walk. I chewed a strip of nutrient moss and grimaced. Mia handed me a foil square. Chocolate, she said, like a priest naming a sacrament. Sweetness detonated under my tongue. I closed my eyes so they wouldn't see it change me. Thank you, I said, and meant it. The heater purred. Meltwater counted time. Evan fought sleep. Head bob, correction. Bob, and caught me watching. He sketched a stick figure falling off a chair and added cartoon motion lines. He stuck his tongue out at his own joke. I tried the gesture back, awkward, and he laughed too loud, and then softer, as if he'd been handed something fragile and absurd. Through the wall, the world prowled. The beasts pressed skull plates to ice and listened to the drum of us. They hunt rhythm. Warmth is just the perfume. Ben eased his breathing to mine. I adjusted. Together we made a boring pattern. It felt like a secret handshake with the dark. You've done this before, he murmured. Being abandoned makes you resourceful. The word fell between our boots like a tool I didn't mean to drop. He didn't say sorry. He didn't say it would be fine. He just stood there beside me, a steady temperature in a climate that eats promises. A vibration lifted the dust. A burrow beast sluiced along the cave wall. A long, lipless scrape. I set my palm to the stone. Ben mirrored me, our hands almost touching through basalt, and an idea named trust. I clicked the lullaby of emptiness, low and dull. Evan, half asleep, contributed without words. He tore a page from his notebook, very slowly. The sound, a flat, uninteresting rip, was perfect camouflage. The beast slid on. When the room finally relaxed, we slid closer to heat. Our elbows touched again. This time, nobody apologized. Another fear crawled up my spine. When they fixed their path, they would leave. Ships leave. Clans leave. I swallowed it like a sharp seed. Evan's voice was fog. We don't leave our own. Am I your own? I hated how small it sounded. He looked at Mia asleep with her hands still ready. At Ben welded to the dark with duty. At me with the wrong scars and a stolen name. He looked at the ridiculous cartoons that had just saved us. Seems like it, he said, and his smile lit a place the heater couldn't reach. We made an agreement without a contract. Survive the storms, strip the wreck, raise a signal. And somewhere between clicks I couldn't stop making, and sketches he couldn't stop drawing, a small thing took root. Not safety. Nerys chose that word. Not warmth. We had coils for that. Something else. A hand on a wrist when the floor starts to move. A decision to lean, not command. I decided then that fear would not be the only memory I kept of this planet. If my clan called this cleansing, I would call it Chapter 1. My name is Ava. Tonight I am not dead. Tonight I am not alone. Morning on Nerys is just night with a different attitude. The cave hummed with cooling coils. Our breath made ghosts that didn't know who to haunt. We ate in shifts, Mia rationing calories like a miser with gold. Ben dividing tasks with the calm of someone who has already made his peace with the cost. Evan handing me the last square of chocolate and pretending he didn't want it. I broke it in half. He tried to refuse. I clicked the sound for stubborn generosity and pressed the piece into his glove. Outside, the wind combed the flats to a hard, singing sheen. We went to the wreck at gray light, 4 shadows stitched to one another by intent. The trailblazer lay hurt and sulking, panels twisted, antenna severed clean at the root. Ben sent Mia to strip med cells and sealants. Evan dove into the ribs to harvest converters, couplers, cable. I took point, ears to the ice, judging the mood of the burrow beasts by the way their tunnels breathed. "We move in 3s, Ben said. "Nobody alone. We don't bleed on the ice." "I never bleed," I said. Mia snorted. "Everyone bleeds. Smart people bleed less." By midday, our packs were clumsy with salvage. I scavenged moss seed, too. Strands bundled in a wrap, a tiny insurance policy against doors that refused to close. Evan added a coil of wire he called lucky. He said it with a straight face. I didn't laugh. Luck, here, is a thing with teeth. We left a cairn at the cave mouth, 4 stones stacked, 1 tilted, our sign to ourselves that we planned to come back alive. Then we turned our backs on heat and walked south. The first miles were bright and cruel. Salt plates rang underfoot. Wind polished obsidian outcrops to knives. The sun was a pale coin someone had already spent. Evan kept pace with me, notebook tucked away for once, hands steady on a sled loaded with metal guts. Ben bracketed us with his quiet vigilance. Mia counted our water and our breaths. On the horizon, the southern range looked like a row of broken teeth. I knew the relay lived there because I had once touched its pedestal as a child and been shocked by the idea of a voice speaking to the sky. My people had built it when they believed treaties were stronger than hunger. Later, when the price of control rose, they pretended it was a myth. We are very good at pretending. We bivouacked under a ledge at last light. Ben set a triangle perimeter with little chirpers that sang if anything bigger than a memory approached. Mia brewed concentrate coffee that smelled like tar and sunrise. She handed me a cup. "Careful. It kicks." I sipped. It kicked. My heart did a small, surprised sprint. Evan passed me a thermal blanket. His fingers brushed mine and held a fraction too long, like he was testing whether the contact would break if the wind pushed. "You take it," he said. "I run hot." He didn't. His knuckles were pale. I should have kept it. I wrapped it around both of us instead, an awkward shared comet tail. He didn't comment. He smiled without teeth, eyes soft as melted snow. Ben pretended not to see. Mia pretended harder. The night crawled. The chirpers chattered twice, small things only. The beasts tunneled deeper, following some calculus we didn't yet know. I dreamt with my eyes open, the way you do when sleep would be an insult to the landscape. Day 2. Wind so clean it sanded thoughts. We crossed fields where the ice had been worried into ripples by a storm older than our ship. Evan's sled squealed until he rigged a tiny skate under its nose and swore he'd invented winter's answer to friction. He sketched it later. A smug sled with sunglasses. I clicked at him to watch his step, which, translated, meant I was grateful. Day 3. A whiteout that tried to edit us from the story. We clipped to a rope and walked by touch. Ben called distance. Mia called status. I called rhythm. Evan, who makes jokes when danger's teeth get too close, didn't. He matched my steps and learned our no beat. When the squall relented, we found a field of obsidian spires gloved in rhyme, chiming as they flexed. He drew them with 5 lines and got the sound right. Day 4. We found bones, not ours. 4 long arcs fused together, an old burrow beast that had tried the surface and failed. Its skull plate was cratered where something bigger had tested it. I put my hand on its ridge and felt the echo of an old fight. Mia took a sample with reverence, a scientist's prayer. Ben marked the spot on his slate. Evan drew the skull, then tucked the page away like a talisman that shouldn't see too much light. Night 4, we slept stacked like books under a low shelf. The blanket became a treaty. When I flinched at a dream I didn't want, Evan's hand found my wrist and held it until the tremor passed. He didn't ask questions. He doesn't buy warmth. He simply offers it and waits to see if you accept. On day 5, the southern range resolved into steppes and scars. We climbed into wind that smelled of stone. The relay dish appeared like a moon fallen into a cradle. Vast, canted, rim scalloped by 1,000 winters. Fading glyphs ringed the base, family marks and system sigils I had been trained to bow to. I did not bow. We made it, Mia breathed, as if the air were finally allowed. Ben swept the perimeter, then gave Evan a nod no louder than a blink. All yours. The array's spine was intact, but asleep. Panels hung crooked, cables nested like gray vipers. Evan approached like a cautious priest. He laid out his gifts: human modules, converters, a spool of lucky wire. Okay, Granddad, he murmured to the dish. Let's get you speaking. I read the glyphs with my mouth, not my eyes, tasting their intentions. This unlock asks for authority I no longer carry, I said. Then we give it something better, Ben said. We give it us. He meant he'd put his name on the line for a system that didn't know him. He meant ownership is a story you can choose to tell different. Mia squeezed into the console housing and fed us power from 3 stolen hearts. Evan stripped, grafted, spliced. The human modules blinked to life like shy animals thawing. I sang the glyph sequence I remembered, and, where authority failed, I used the code we keep behind our teeth. Childhood lullabies that double as back doors. It's not noble. It works. Blue-green light woke the console. The dish shuddered. Frost cracked along its rim like knuckles popping. Evan whooped, then bit it off, respectful of sleeping winters. Ben allowed himself the smallest smile. Mia handed out sips of concentrate coffee as if to bless the moment. Align to fleet band, Ben said. Translating, I said, and made my mouth a bridge, while Evan made his cable speak both languages. He drew a little kiss mark on the adapter and whispered, Be friendly. The dish groaned, tilted, stretched its throat to the sky. Static. Then a thread of voice so thin it felt like a nerve. We're reading you faint. Identity? Aurora, Ben said, steady as a heartbeat. This is Carter. Trailblazer survivors plus 1 local specialist. Coordinates transmitting. Fuel compromised. Hostiles possible. Copy. Firm. Drift your beacon. Dakota is on picket. Window in 72. Joy and fear got braided in my chest. 72 hours. A number with edges. A promise with clauses. The humans had a way out. They'd earned it. I had a habit of being left. I stepped back from the console. The glyphs watched me with old, blind authority. My clan's mark sat there like a brand on a borrowed animal. Mia touched my shoulder, bringing me back into my body. Hey, breathe. I am, I said, and realized I'd forgotten. Evan checked the uplink once, twice, thrice, the way he checks doors he cares about. Then he turned to me as if the dish, this frozen cathedral, the fleet itself, were all background to a smaller and more complicated question. We don't leave our own, he said again, powerful precisely because he wasn't trying to be. Can you keep that promise when choices cost? I asked. I needed to say it out loud where it could hurt us if it had to. He didn't flinch. That's when the promise means anything. Ben called us to positions. We built a camp snug against the relay's pedestal, moss sealing the wind's mouth. We set watches. We ate little and drank less. The dish turned its ear to the sky and listened like an old wolf who had decided not to die yet. That night the predators tested us. Soft thuds against the pedestal, the slow exploratory scrape of a skull plate along our wall. Ben and I stood back to back, our breaths tamped down to the dull metronome that bores predators. Mia counted out oxygen in seconds. Evan tore another page of his notebook with that same steady, uninteresting sound. I realized we had become a system, not the kind that issues orders, the kind that survives. Around midnight, a different vibration threaded the ice. Lighter, quicker. Not a beast. A drone. Ours? No. Mine. Clan design. Sleek. Listening. The relay had woken more than the fleet. Scouts, I whispered. Ben's rifle lifted a fraction. Yours? They will say I am theirs. A wash of old terror slicked my hands. Contracts written in childhood. Curators who call themselves mothers. Return to the cage, dressed as ceremony. The price of control is always paid by daughters. Options? Ben asked. Hide heat. Blur signatures. Let the relay look like the only living thing. My voice was steady by training. My bones were not. We did all three. Moss, blankets, patient breathing, clever wiring. The drone skimmed our ridge and hesitated. Its sensors tasted the relay's ancient authority and liked the flavor better. It slid on. In its passing wake, I felt the hunt coiling in a different direction, toward the possibility of me. Mia squeezed my hand. Evan bumped his shoulder against mine, casual and deliberate. Ben stayed at my back like a promise. The relay hummed a thin, continuous note. The sound of a line finally cast into the dark. 72 hours is a long time to keep faith on a planet that dislikes continuity. We would have to guard the dish, ration heat, shake off scouts, lift our signal like a stubborn prayer. I lay awake under our ledge and counted the truths I could control. My name, my breathing, the small, improbable warmth of a shared blanket. The fact that, in the blue-green light of a console, faces look closer than they should, and speak slower than they do anywhere else. In the morning, if Nerys allowed a morning, we would begin keeping a promise from both directions. They would not leave me. I would not abandon myself. The Aurora's bay doors opened like a careful mouth, and we rolled in under floodlights that made our frost look theatrical instead of fatal. Warm air hit me so hard my eyes watered. Hands, human hands in orange sleeves, pulled our sleds. Ramps hummed. Someone laughed from relief. The ship smelled like coolant, citrus cleaner, and a little bit like people trying to be brave. "Carter, welcome aboard," a voice said on the overhead. Calm, female, pilot's confidence. Dock 4 sealed. Pressure holding. Ben's shoulders let go of a piece of weight you only see when it leaves. He nodded once at the nearest camera, the way he nods at weather. Respected. Never trusted. Mia herded us to Med for scans, while Evan kept looking back at me as if I was contraband he wanted to smuggle through the rest of his life. He handed me a clean shirt and looked away while I changed, which is to say he looked everywhere else with saintly concentration and ears pink as a signal flare. I tucked my old shirt into my pack like a flag from a country that had lost me. The Aurora had corridors like rivers, colored lines in the deck to follow, nodes blinking politely, doors that whispered names. I learned their names fast. I learned systems like some people learned songs. Evan learned me the way he learned stubborn machinery. Patient. Hands off until I invited a touch. We were barely 2 hours into safe when the universe reminded us it collects taxes. "Contacts jumping in," the pilot said, voice suddenly clipped. "2 small, 1 medium. Vector piracy. All hands." Her sentence folded under a sound like a god biting the hull. Lights pitched, the deck tilted, alarm pedals unfurled in red. Ben was already moving. Mia, med lockdown, then oxygen management. Evan, with Ava, engineering. Brooks, you're my hands under the floor. Ava, you're our fire whisperer if their shot punctured fluid lines. He didn't have to ask if I knew that song. On Nerys, everything burns the wrong way. We sprinted, doors irised. Marines slid by with magnets in their boots and purpose in their eyes. Somewhere overhead, the pilot, call sign Finch, I learned later, put the Aurora in a dance no one teaches in classrooms. The world leaned and leaned back. Engineering glowed gold and angry. Panels blinked a language that wanted apology and got procedure. A hit had scored across the fuel manifold. Lines hissed like insulted snakes. The ship shuddered, dozens of bodies bracing at once. "Evac, the non-essential," the chief engineer started, then saw Evan and pointed like she was passing a wrench across a chasm. "Brooks, you're late, but I'll allow it. Cut feed to B and C, isolate D. Who's the civilian?" I raised my hand because old habits die loud. "Ava." "She's with me," Evan said, as if the sentence came with credentials. Ben didn't waste syllables. "We're crawling. Smoke protocols. Ava reads. Brooks cuts." We slid into the crawl space under the manifold. Heat pressed down like a decision you cannot delay. Smoke gathered low. A smart predator. The only safe was forward. "Okay," Evan breathed. "We'll do it the Nerys way." He meant, we make boring rhythms. We keep our heartbeats from telling hunters where to bite. He met my eyes through his mask. I nodded, and we matched tempo. Slow in, slow out. Not a single cough that would stutter the air. We reached the junction. It was uglier than I hoped. Conduit scorched. A spray of fuel like cold glitter in the beam. A hiss that carried a harmonica I did not like. I put 2 fingers to the piping, the way I had to basalt when beasts listened, and felt the vibration of a pressure wave threading toward explosion. "Line D will cascade in 40 seconds, I said. 30, Evan corrected, not to be superior, but because he could hear the same math. "On my mark," Ben said through the grate. "Brooks cuts, Ava, prep dampers. I'm purging O2 between bays. Mia will keep us breathing dirt if she has to." I pulled the emergency dampers, the old-fashioned kind with manual teeth, and fed them the rhythm the line would believe. "Shh," I said, to metal. I have never shushed anything tender, only beasts and systems. Evan's cutter spat light. We counted in our head. At 27 he sliced hard. I slammed the damper. Ben bellowed, "Purge!" Air roared somewhere else as oxygen routes recharted. The hiss peaked, screamed, died. A sheet of flame lifted like a cloak, then collapsed, insulted. We lay very still while Heat thought about it and decided to leave. The ship held a long, shivery breath. Then engineering screamed in triumph, as if something scored during a game I didn't yet know the rules of. "Manifold contained," the chief yelled. "Whoever you are, marry the ship." "Already in a relationship," Evan said, but his hand was shaking, and he pressed it flat to the deck the way people press gratitude to earth. I didn't feel heroic. I felt precise. It is a different high. We slithered out, coughing now that Ben led us. Mia met us at the hatch with gel and orders. "Masks off. Slow. Burns next." In the medlight, my skin told a new story. Forearms kissed by heat. A jag across my shoulder, where a panel had tried to hug me. Mia smoothed cool over the bad places with a touch that said, "No one pays me extra to care this much. I do it anyway." Evan hovered like a second IV pole that thought it could block danger by sheer proximity. "You can go," I told him, "because you have to give people the exit that will make them choose not to take it." He looked at the doorway, then at me. "I'm sticking around, just in case." He tried to sound casual. He failed beautifully. The deck thrummed. Outside our metal belly, someone else entered the fight. A heavier tone, the kind of mass that changes everyone's plan, stepped into orbit. Fleet Ship Dakota, arriving hot, Finch reported, unable to keep the grin out of her voice. Salvo in 3, 2. Light bled through the med bay glass, as if the sun had been reminded of its job. The raiders, salvagers with clipped morals, took the hint. Their medium ship slewed away, one small one already a smear. The other spun out a ragged jump that sounded like a lie falling downstairs. Dakota to Aurora, a new voice said, full of granite and good humor. You call. We haul. Who lit your manifold before we got here? Mia tapped the comm and, without looking up from wrapping my shoulder, said, a commander who knows ventilation, an engineer who knows timing, and a woman who tells fire bedtime stories until it sleeps. Good team, Dakota said, clear to breathe. I let the adrenaline fall out of me in careful pieces. The med bed hummed. My burns cooled. Evan's knee bumped mine, not by accident. Ben checked the corridor like decisions might try to sneak in, and he could catch them. In the tremor after the fight, 3 discoveries landed like coins on a table, one after another, sharp enough to be counted. First, the raiders weren't random. Mia brought me a shard of a transponder we'd netted in the chaos. Its encryption sigil was familiar. Not a family mark, not exactly. A curator's brand, the kind they use to mark property that runs. I didn't say the word daughter. I didn't have to. Ben met my eyes and nodded once, a promise to be made later with actions. Second, Aurora's fuel, fleet standard, reacts too eagerly with trace minerals in Nerys frost. A tiny chemical romance that turns smoke mean. I showed Evan the compound using Med's pocket spectrometer. He showed me a mod in the feed that would make future fires less hungry. We wrote it up together, the first paper I have ever authored with grease under my nails. Third, the relay I had woken had sung more than a rescue note. In its old code was a clause buried by my people, an agreement with Earth signed in exchange for a corridor through the system. A corridor where raids were not accidents, but levied tolls. The price of control, Ben said, reading it the way commanders read maps of wars they inherit. I tasted copper. I had helped turn the dish. I had helped tune the wolves. Then we stopped paying in daughters, I said. My voice surprised me. It sounded like someone who had decided not to kneel again. Evan reached for my hand and didn't finish the gesture. He left it in the air like a bridge I could choose to cross. I did. Our fingers fit without fanfare. Later, when the ship was steadier and the worst of the heat had been persuaded to behave, we sat in engineering with our backs to a humming panel and shared a cup of terrible coffee. Ben made his rounds. Mia napped upright like soldiers do. Evan drew the fire as a red rope. He drew us cutting it. He added a tiny cartoon of the Dakota with a hero cape. Then, bashful, he crossed the cape out. This isn't gratitude or accident, he said, voice quiet, eyes on the sketch. This is me choosing. And me, I said, because declarations are cheap until you pay for them with a consequence. I had just chosen against an empire that thinks it raised me. I would choose again. The hull stopped creaking like a tired house and relaxed into its orbit. The alarms went back to being ideas instead of teeth. I lay back on warm metal that had decided not to kill me and let my eyes close. For the first time since the ice, sleep took me like a tide, not a trap. I dreamt of a rope gone slack and 2 hands still holding on. New Austin Orbital looked like someone had braided dawn into a ring. Lanes of light flowed in curves I wanted to touch. Dock crews in blue and gold waved us in with paddles that glowed like tame comets. The announcer voice on the overhead was warm as a kitchen. Aurora, berth assigned. Welcome home. Home. The word landed like a coin on my tongue. Cool first, then warming. We drifted to the lock. Gravity eased up, kind, forgiving. The bay doors opened and the air hit me with rain. Not water, just its rumor. Citrus cleaner, ozone, hot wiring, and beneath it, street smell. The ghost of night markets and wet concrete. Evan saw my face and smiled like he'd arranged the scent personally. Ben was already halfway down the ramp, handing his slate to a port authority officer and speaking in a grammar made of yes, no, and here's what we owe. Carter, Aurora, he said. 1 additional crew. Status, essential specialist, active. Name, Ava. He didn't look back to see if I was there. He knew I was. Mia, beside me, bumped my shoulder with hers. Baseline here is too much coffee and a little hope, she said. You'll fit. We rode a shuttle up through the station's throat. Windows unfurled a city under clouds. Austin braided to New Austin by a glassy tether. Night lit by traffic running in clean ribbons. Drone gardens drifted like islands. A school posted its homework in hologram over a courtyard. Someone had drawn a dinosaur piloting a bus. Evan nudged me and whispered, "Art scene's brutal." I pressed my fingertips to the window, a child gesture from a life I wasn't supposed to have. It's loud. Yeah, he said. It forgives, too. Transit hummed us to customs. We queued in a lane marked Crew Alliance. A holo asked for declarations. Ben answered for us. Weapons secured, salvage logged, threats reported, debts to be argued later. The clerk, soft-eyed, looked at me. Species? A person, I said. She grinned, typed, person, and handed me a card with a photo I didn't remember taking. I looked like someone who had just discovered kitchens. Security pinged and cleared. We walked. Floors here glow enough that no one trips. Water ran under glass like the station wanted us to remember rivers. Somewhere, a busker played a steel guitar with a synth overlay. Human hands convincing sound to be a bridge. On the mezzanine, politics waited. Not with flags. Those come later. With smiles and a display wall. My people's crest had been added to the alliance ribbon, tucked between 2 names that still smelled like gunpowder. I felt the old pull to stand straight and say the right syllables. I didn't. A woman waited by the case, a stranger in museum clothes, her hair coiled neat. Her eyes were a knife under velvet. She smiled the way curators smile when cataloging a rare return. Ava, she said, shaping my name like an asset. You were expected to come back in chains. Good for you, choosing a more elegant arrival. The floor tilted without moving. Old protocols lit in my throat, a reflex I didn't consent to. Curator, I said, because she'd hear mother in any other word and believe it. You shouldn't be here. On the contrary, she touched the crest like it was hers to dust. The corridor treaty you activated has clauses, custody, memory integrity. I am here to exercise them. Your signature as a child suffices. I was 10, I said. I signed to keep a cousin from losing her name. Consent is a continuum, she said, sweet as poison. And you were bred for duty. Ben stepped in, not between but beside. She's crew, he said. Her status was filed on entry. Status is a sticker, the curator said. Property is a ledger. Mia's hands found her pockets. She looked like she was keeping them from finding a needle. Evan didn't move. That was the choice. He would be the one to make me brave if I wanted it. The curator lifted a device like a small harp. Light ran across its strings and pricked the back of my teeth. A recall tone. A leash. I tasted iron. My knees wanted to kneel. No, I said, and the word had weight, because it leaned on other words I had said in caves and crawl spaces. The recall tone rose. I whistled back, the old countersong hidden in lullabies. I folded the melody into the station's own thrum, spun it like a child's trick with a coin. The harp's light stuttered. The recall tone snagged on a seam in the air and went out like a match. She blinked, offended. "Who taught you that?" "Burrow beasts," I said, "and people who don't leave their own." I stepped onto the display dais, not to bow, but to be seen. "Ben Carter," I said, loud enough for the nearby cameras and gossipers and the steel guitar all to hear. "File this amendment." I reached for Evan's hand. He gave it. Warm. Steady. "My name is Ava Carter. By choice, not blood." The clerk from Customs, watching, startled, then grinned and tapped her console like she'd been waiting to legalize something. The wall rippled. A small line of text appeared under the crest. "Carter. Ava. Crew." The curator hissed as if ink could wound her. "Name law is localized," she said. "The corridor's claim supersedes." "About the corridor," Ben said, mild in tone, not in content. He handed her a packet. "Your toll schedule routed raiders at us, and 4 other civilian ships. We have logs. We have Aurora's manifold data. We have your drone signatures sniffing our relay at 0312. You wanted a door. We were the handle." Her smile thinned. "You misunderstand." "Do I?" he said, and turned to the case. He palmed the crest. The glass read him as visitor, then as witness. "Public record. Now." The wall obeyed. Station law loves a declaration. Our relay logs bloomed tall as a courtroom, glyphs and human code braided. Mia threw up the med readings, fuel reactions, oxygen purges, burns that scalded numbers into meaning. Evan added the manual dampers, labeled in his handwriting, the kind a jury wants to trust. I sang the glyphs underside, soft, but the microphones picked it up. Lullabies and loopholes. People gathered. The busker slid into a minor key. The curator's veneer cracked. "You are making a mistake in an arena that remembers," she said. "Good," I breathed. "Let it remember us." Security arrived, late because power prefers to be politely delayed. The chief listened, looked at our files, looked at the woman who had walked in with a harp and an old contract. "Ma'am, you're welcome to file an objection through Alliance channels. Meanwhile, interfering with a filed crew member is a violation. Please release the device." She released it the way people release snakes. "Go home," I told her, "if that word still fits." "It will fit you again," she said, a promise disguised as prophecy. "No," I said, and felt something tear without bleeding. A tether cut, a story rerouted. After, when the display wall returned to being a wall, and the crowd remembered they had groceries to buy, the chief clapped Ben on the shoulder with 2 fingers. "Good filing. Nice edges." She nodded at me. "Welcome aboard, Miss Carter." Mia exhaled all at once and swore softly in a language that uses curses like flowers. Evan's hand was still in mine. He hadn't noticed. I had. We took a lift to a viewing gallery. Earth lay below, ridiculous and blue. Storms curled like sleeping cats. The station's glass held our reflections a breath apart. Evan cleared his throat, cautious with something large. "I want you to see the city," he said. Not the brochure version, the rain-slick street one. "Show me," I said. We went down. The shuttle whispered into the tether, and gravity changed its mind twice. Austin smelled like wet concrete, exhaust, cilantro, and a pastry I later learned to love like family. Skater drones zipped under bridges. A kid in a school uniform yelled, "Nice hair," at me and ran away giggling. A repair swarm reskinned a bus stop in silent choreography. 3 moons hung low between buildings. 2 real tonight. 1 a billboard. Ordinary futures everywhere. On a footbridge, Evan stopped. The river shoved past underneath like a friend who had to be somewhere. He took my hand, the way you lift something priceless by the strongest points. unhurried, declarative without speeches, a promise meant to be kept. "This isn't charity," he said. "This is shelter we build together." I looked at his face in the glass and at mine beside it, softened by city light into someone I might have been if no one had ever trained me to kneel. I know. We ate too much. We drank coffee that tasted like forgiveness. We bought a plant for the Aurora's galley because ships deserve green. Mia texted a photo of Ben asleep at his desk, stylus still in hand, captioned, "Commander.exe has stopped." I laughed out loud and scared a pigeon. At twilight, we stood on the cargo ramp, earth warmth pressing up through my boots. The station mumbled bedtime traffic and lights above us. Ben joined us with 2 cups of terrible tea that he pretends to like. He offered one to me. "Crewman," he said, "dry as dust and twice as kind." "Commander," I answered, and the word didn't scratch. Out there, the corridor would keep spinning. The system would try to trade lives for lanes. But we had bared its accounting, and the station had recorded our refusal. That record would travel faster than raiders do. It would save people we would never meet. On the ramp, with the city breathing and the ship behind us, I said the thing I had brought across ice and fire and the kind of contract that steals your sleep. "My name is Ava Carter," I said, steady. "By choice, not blood." And I stepped forward, into a life where leaving isn't proof of strength, where warmth isn't paid for with obedience, where a hand is an anchor because it refuses to close into a fist.